In this video, we're going to look at Venn diagrams. So here we've got an example. Sam asked 100 people which of the films Frozen, Titanic and Shrek they watched. Here is some information about his results. 55 people had watched Frozen, 58 had watched Titanic, 60 had watched Shrek, 36 had watched Frozen and Shrek, 35 had watched Frozen and Titanic, 37 had watched Titanic and Shrek, 20 had watched all three films. Part A says draw a Venn diagram to show this information. So what we're going to do first in a Venn diagram question like this, we always choose the number that's got all three individuals. So we know that 20 had watched all three films. So here is our Venn diagram. So we're going to label this as the following. So we've got Frozen, Titanic and Shrek. Now we know that 20 people watched all three. So now we're going to go back to the question and say, right, so we know that 20 people watched all three. Now the next case is 37 people had watched Titanic and Shrek. So when we go to our Venn diagram, this is the circle for Titanic. This is the circle for Shrek. So this intersection, which I'm going to highlight in green, all of this is the intersection. That's people that watched Titanic and Shrek. Now we know that is 37. So the whole section must add up to 37. So I've already got 20 people there already. So I need to add on 17 more people. Then I go back to my list and say, right, that's done. Then the next section is Frozen and Titanic, and there were 35 people there. Okay, 35. So Frozen and Titanic. So I know that's this intersection here, so I'm going to highlight that in this color here. So we know that if we go back to the question, they've told us it's 35. So we've already got 20 individuals already. So we need to add on 15. So that will give me 35 individuals. And lastly, we need to go to Frozen and Shrek, and that was 36 people. So we can do that in blue. So 36 for Frozen and Shrek. So, well, that's this section here. So the whole thing, just double check with the question, is 36. So we've already got 20 people, so we're going to add on 16. So now we can say, right, there were 55 people that watched Frozen. So what we're going to do now is do 55 minus all of these intersections for Frozen, which is 15 plus 20 plus 16. And that will give me 4. So what's remainder is 4. So when you add all of the numbers into the circle of Frozen, you would get 55. Then we're going to do the same for Titanic. So let's go back to the question. So that's done. So Titanic had 58. So we do 58 minus all of the small intersections that we have. So that's 15 plus 20 plus 17. And that's going to give me 6. So 6 goes here. And again, if we add them all together, we'll get 58. And the last one is Shrek, which is 60. So we do the same thing. 60 minus 16 plus 20 plus 17, and that will give me 7. So I get 7 there. If I add them all together, I'll get 60. But if we add all the numbers in the circles together and minus that from 100, which is the total number of individuals, that will give me the number on the outside. So that will give me 15. So there's 15 people who never watched any of the 3 movies. Okay, so that's how we draw our Venn diagram. So I'll just write that here on the side. So it's 100 minus the sum of all of these values. So that's 4 plus 15 plus 20 plus 16 plus 17 plus 4 plus 6 plus 7. So as we can see, that gives me 15. And that's the number that goes on the outside. So there we go. We've got our Venn diagram. So for part B, Sam picks at random one of these 100 people. Given that the person had watched Titanic, work out the probability that this person had also watched Frozen. So the word given that is something called a conditional probability. So we'll go back to the question again, make sure we read it carefully. Given that the person had watched Titanic, we need to work out the probability that this person had also watched Frozen. Okay, so what we're going to do for a question like this is say, right, so given that the person had watched Titanic, we need to say, what is the total number of people who watched Titanic? So we can say, right, the number of people, so the number of people who watched Titanic, we know from the question, was 58. But we want to work out the probability that these individuals have also watched Frozen. So we determined that the number of people who watched Titanic was 58. And out of those 58 people, we need to work out how many of those 58 people watched Frozen as well. And it's this intersection part here. So we've got these 15 people plus these 20 people. So that will give me 15 plus 20, which is 35. But we want the probability. So if we go back to the question, it says, given that the person had watched Titanic, work out the probability that this person had also watched Frozen. So we need to say, right, we've got 58 people who watched Titanic. So there were 35 of those who watched Frozen as well. So it's 35 out of a total of 58 people who watched Titanic. Here's another question for you to try. You can pause the video, and when you're done, I will go through my work solution. Okay, welcome back. So in this question, it says the following shows the results of a drinks tasting survey of 100 people. 96 liked Pepsi, 93 liked Fanta, 96 liked Sprite, 92 liked Pepsi and Fanta, 91 liked Fanta and Sprite, 93 liked Pepsi and Sprite, and 90 liked all three. So draw a Venn diagram to represent the data. So what we're going to do is we're going to first label this as Pepsi, Fanta and Sprite. So let's do that straight away. So we've got Pepsi, Fanta and Sprite. So we know that 90 liked all three. So that's going to go in the middle. And then now we need to go back to the question and do exactly what they say. So 90 liked all three. Now 93 liked Pepsi and Sprite. Now we can say Pepsi and Sprite is here. So this section. So if that's 93, we've already got 90 already, so we can have 3 here. So we can make sure we've sorted that out. So we've got all 90, we've got 93 here. 91 liked Fanta and Sprite. So we're going to go to Fanta and Sprite, which is this section. Here. So it's 91, so we've got one person there. So that's done. And then we've got 92 liked Pepsi and Fanta. So we get 2 there. And I'll just highlight that in blue so you can see the intersection parts for Pepsi and Fanta, respectively. So we've done those. And then we can go back to the rest of the question. So 96 liked Pepsi. So we've got 95 here already. So we've got 1. So that's done. Then 93 people liked Fanta. So we can say, well, we've already got 93 in this section. So we've got 0 here. And we've got 96 people liked Sprite. So we go down to Sprite. So we've got 93, 94. So we're going to have 2 people here. Don't forget, we need to add up all the values in the circle, every single value, minus it from 100. And we get 1 person didn't like any of the 3 drinks. So that's our Venn diagram completed. So now it says, find the probability that a randomly selected person from the survey likes none of the 3 drinks. So that's the number on the outside. So we can say, right, so that's going to be B part 1. 1 out of 100 people is the probability. Then part 2 says, find the probability that a randomly selected person from the survey likes Pepsi, but not Fanta. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight that. So I'm going to say, well, if you like Pepsi but not Fanta, it means we're not going to include the intersection part. So we've got this value here, 1, and we've got this value here, which is 3. So that's going to be 1 plus 3, which is 4. So that's going to be 4 out of 100. And then we're going to do part C. So part C says, given that the person from the survey likes Pepsi, find the probability that the person likes Sprite. So now we need to say, well, how many people do we know in the survey like Pepsi? Well, that's 96. So let's write that down. So number of people who like Pepsi we know altogether is 96. Now we go back to our Venn diagram and we want to find out the probability that the person likes Sprite. So what I'm going to do is shade in that section of the people who like Sprite who also like Pepsi. So that's going to be this section here. And that's 3 people plus this section here. So that's 93. So that gives me 93. So it'll be 93 out of the total people who like Pepsi, which is 93 out of 96, because there were 96 people who liked Pepsi altogether.